R in the word fork is saying or. So you don't go saying fake. The word is fork. We have sports. Sport. We have short. Short. Note, you don't go short, you don't go spot. You ensure you pronounce the long sound or. For AR, we have AR saying or as in dwarf. Dwarf. Dwarf is spelled D-W-A-R-F. That word is dwarf. You don't go saying dwarf. The AR says or. So repeat after me. Say dwarf. We have war. War. In the word, we also have AR saying or. We also have AW saying or as in saw. Saw. Jaw. Jaw. We have draw. Can you repeat after me? Say draw. Excellent. We also have AL saying or as in board. Board is spelled B-A-L-D. It's bored and not bad or bar. So when you see a person with a bald head, you don't say he has a bald head. Rather, you say he has a bald head. We also have AL saying or as in all. We have AL saying or as in tall. The vowel number 8 is pronounced as O. Can you repeat after me? Say O. 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 Excellent. Fools, I want you to listen to the sound again and tell me if it is a short sound or a long sound. O. Is it short or long? If you say it's short, that is great. Yes, it is a short sound. You say O. And for this sound, we have different spelling variants. We have letter O saying O. We have O saying O. And we have letter U saying O. Let's start with letter O saying O. We have the word woman. Say woman. Woman. Excellent. You don't pronounce it as woman. We also have O saying O as in foot. Foot. Cook. Say that after me. Say cook. Book. Book. Now in those words, you notice that the O is saying O. We also have U saying O as in pot. Pot. Bush. Bush. Push. We have push. Good. So the other vowel, which is O, is a short vowel, and we've talked about O, and U making the sound O. Now we're going to take sentences using the O sound, O. I want you to listen to the sentence and repeat after me. The dwarf is short. The dwarf is short. He has a bald head. He has a bald head. We go for sport every Wednesday. We go for sport every Wednesday. Can you try the sentences on your own? Excellent. Now we're also going to look at some sentences with the O sound. I love playing football. I love playing football. Can you pass me the sugar? Can you pass me the sugar? The woman is pretty. The woman is pretty. Excellent. So I want you to get more sentences and practice on your own. And also try to pronounce the sounds correctly when you are speaking. Remember, you have to practice for you to become a better speaker of the English language. I'm going to see you in the next lesson.
Hello, learner. How are you doing today? It is that time where we get to learn how to speak right and stand out again. I am your regular teacher, Godfrey by name, and I want to believe that so far, by means of these lessons you've been exposed to, you're getting better and it's improving your speaking ability. I believe that to be the case because I've been hearing lots of positive reports about you, and I've been hearing that this has been having a tremendous impact on you. And so I would want you to keep practicing, keep using this, and keep showing it in front of everyone that cares to listen to you practicing with this. Okay? Now, the last time we learned about our vowel sounds, so far we've talked about our vowels 5 to 8. The last time we learned about our vowels 7 and 8. And we learned about the O sound. We also talked about the O sound. And then we looked at some word examples with these sounds. Now today we're going to be moving on to something that is going to give us a very good level of speaking ability. And that is what I call intonation. We're going to be talking about intonation. Now, I'm sure some of you have heard of intonation before. For some of you, you haven't. But then intonation is one aspect of your speaking ability that can attract so many people to you. And it can also send away so many people from you if you don't have a good intonation. And so today we're going to be learning how to come up with a good intonation and how to use this when we're speaking with our mommies, our daddies, our friends in the market, wherever we find ourselves. We're going to be learning how to practice with this intonation. So today we're going to be focusing only on the rising intonation. We're going to be focusing on the rising tone, and we're going to be learning how to use the rising tone. Now let's talk about intonation. You see, intonation is the rise and fall of the tone of the voice when speaking. What does this mean? It simply means that whenever you're speaking, there should be a rise and fall of the tone of the voice. It shouldn't just be a straight movement. There has to be a wave-like movement of the tone of the voice. Okay? Now, if you can do this, it simply means you have a good intonation. Now, some people say intonation isn't really important, but the truth of the matter is it really is, and the sooner you get to start using it, the better for you. So just as we've said, the rise and fall of the tone of the voice when speaking. As a matter of fact, a textbook defined intonation to be the melody of words, meaning that the way you say your words that have a direct impact on your intonation. So today I'm going to be teaching you a tip as to how to go about using the rising tone so that you can sound very good like Mr. Godswill as from today, if you're willing to practice. So are you with your book and your pencils or your pens? Now bring it out as we learn together on intonation. Now we've seen intonation to be the rise and fall of the tone of the voice when speaking. Now we have two types of intonation. We have the rising intonation and the falling intonation. Now let's focus on the rising intonation. The rising intonation is when we make use of a high pitch when you're speaking. You make use of a high pitch when you're speaking, and that's why it's called the rising tone. The tone keeps going up. It's a high pitch you keep using because you want to use the rising intonation. Now we have some instances where we get to use this rising intonation. We don't just get to use it whatever time we feel like. No, there are some instances that should guide us as to how to use this rising intonation. The first instance is when you're asking a yes or no question. When you're asking a yes or no question. Now, most of us know yes and no questions to be those questions that when you're being asked, you answer either yes or no. Like when I say a sentence like, does Mr. Godswell live here? You are likely to say yes or no. But pay attention to how I ask the sentence. I use the rising tone for it. Now, if you look at the screen here, you would see that when you're using the rising tone, there has to be an arrow at the beginning of the sentence and also at the end of the sentence. Now, the arrow there is showing you when to use the rising tone, and it's making you understand that you're supposed to use the rising tone for the last syllable of the word. So here's what we're going to do. Let's look at the instances where we can have these yes or no questions in sentences. Like if I should have a question like, can I play with you? That is a yes or no question. And so when you're asking this type of question, you want to use the rising tone. Or if I should say, did you see my sister? That's also a yes or no question. If I should say, have you had breakfast? Also a yes or no question. But take note of the way I was saying it. I didn't say, have you had breakfast? No. I said, have you had breakfast? The tone keeps going up because it is the rising tone. I hope you're following me with this. Now, you have to understand that apart from when you're asking a yes or no question, you also get to use the rising tone when you're listing items. Now, let's still focus on the yes or no question. I would want you to do an exercise for me. Write 5 yes or no questions of your choice and try to read them using the tone I've just learned on how to ask your yes or no question. Okay, now when you're done reading it, you could probably read it to your mom, your dad, or anyone around you, and they will tell you if you're getting it or not. Now let's move on to the incomplete sentences. Incomplete sentences are just like phrases. They need you to add some more words to them to make them complete. Like if I should say a sentence like, if I were you, if I were you, that's an incomplete sentence. Does that make sense on its own? No, it doesn't. When I say if I were you, it doesn't make sense on its own. So I have to complete it, okay? Or if I should say on my way to school, on my way to school. Now your incomplete sentences begins with words like if, when, by, on, under, as, for, and so on and so forth. So when you have a sentence beginning with any of these words, please know you will be having an incomplete sentence in it. Now I'm going to show you some example of incomplete sentences. I'd like to listen to how you'd say them. Now let's look at this one on the screen. It says, by the time I got there. Can you try to say that? Let me hear you. You're doing very well. Now look at this other one that says, when I got home later in the day. Can you try to say that? Okay, nice to see you're picking up. Okay, now let's say I have another incomplete sentence like the one on the screen here that says, for your information. Can you say that? Very good. So all these are examples of incomplete sentences. And then always remember, we have to use a rising tone for them. Now let's move on to another instance where we get to use the rising tone, which are for our listing items. So whenever you're listing items, remember you have to use the rising tone. What do we mean by listing items? When you're mentioning things in the list, okay, like if I should say, I would like to be a doctor, a farmer, a teacher, an engineer, and a pastor. Did you see the way I kept using the rising tone? I didn't say a doctor, a farmer, an engineer. No. I said a doctor, a farmer, an engineer, a teacher, and a... Do you understand that? So as long as you keep mentioning things, you use the rising tone. Or if I should say, on my way to the market, that's an incomplete sentence. And then you say, I'd love to buy a football, a doll, withdraw some money, and so on and so forth. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to show you some sentences where we're listing items, and I'm going to read them while you try to repeat after me. So can I hear you say, in my classroom, we have pens, books, and windows. Very good. Now also, let's say we have another sentence like this one below the screen that says, the names of my teachers are Timothy, Matthew, Sylvester, John, Felix, and Andrew. Can you say that? Okay, that's a wonderful trial. That's a wonderful trial. You're doing very well, and I'm so proud of you. So I want to believe you've learned about the rising tone today. As you can see, it's not so difficult, and it's something you can start using as from today, and it will always be admired by everyone that listens to you speak. So keep practicing and keep learning, and see you all in the next lesson. Hello, my wonderful learner. I am delighted to see you again. It's your regular teacher, Godswill by name, and I'm so happy to see that you've been practicing with all the lessons you've been receiving so far. I am excited because I can tell that this has been improving your speaking ability if you've been really practicing. Okay, and so the last time when we treated our last lesson, we talked about intonation, and then we learned how to go about using the right intonation when speaking in a way that we get admired by all. And then we talked about the instances where we get to use the right intonation. We looked at yes or no question, incomplete sentences, and when listing items. So we looked at how we can use all of these, and then how we could use the right intonation for them whenever we're trying to say them in sentences, which is a very important lesson you want to keep practicing until it becomes a part of you. Now today we have another interesting lesson we're going to be talking about. We're going to be learning about sentence stress. Can we try to say that together? Yes, that is the word, sentence stress. You see, in English language, we have what we call sentence stress. Now, if you can remember, we've talked about word stress, and I said when we talked about word stress, we looked at words with 2 and 3 syllables. We looked at words with 2 syllables being called disyllabics, and words with 3 syllables being called trisyllabics. And then if you can remember, I told you that syllables make up words. And so word stress would simply mean that you focus on syllables in words. But today we're not talking about word stress. We're looking at sentence stress. Now, when you're talking about sentence stress, you have to understand that what makes up a sentence are words. And so if you want to understand how to use sentence stress, you have to focus more on words. So what is sentence stress? Sentence stress is simply the giving of greater force or emphasis to certain words in a sentence by making them sound louder, longer, and clearer than other words in the same sentence. Now let me break it down. Let me take it again. Sentence stress is the giving of greater force. Sentence stress is the giving of greater force or emphasis to certain words in a sentence by making them sound louder, longer, and clearer than other words in the same sentence. Now, what does this tell you? It tells you that when you have a sentence, you shouldn't say them flat like the average Nigerians would do. So what you want to do is you want to stress some words in that sentence. Like when you have a sentence like what we have on the screen there, most average Nigerians would naturally say, I am going to the market, which is totally wrong. Now, if you want to learn how to speak right, you have to understand how to stress your words, even in that sentence. So if I want to say that, I'll say, I am going to the market. Can you try to say that? Bravo, you're getting it. Now, you might wonder, how did Mr. Goswin know that he's supposed to stress going and market? Well, that is because I understand the fact that sentence stress is divided into two parts. We have two types of words. We have the content words and then we have the grammatical words. Now, those words we stress in the sentence are known as content words. But then those ones we rush over in a sentence, we end up calling them grammatical words. So content words are those words we stress in the sentence. Grammatical words are those words we rush over in a sentence. So what you want to do is you want to focus more on your content word in a sentence and try to stress them so that your meaning can be clear to whoever it is that is listening to you. Now let's look at how we can identify content words in sentences. How do we know that going is a content word? How do we know the market is a content word? So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to list out the parts of speech that whenever you have these parts of speech, you know these parts of speech belong to the content words. Now the parts of speech are nouns, adjectives, main verbs, adverbs, demonstrative and reflexive pronouns, negative markers, contractions, and exclamations. Now, as I said earlier, when you have any of these parts of speech, you know you should stress them in a sentence. Now, we're going to be taking some of these parts of speech and we're going to be looking at how we can go about stressing them in a sentence. So let's start with the nouns. Now, we know nouns to be naming words, isn't it? Yes. So let's say I have this sentence on your screen here, and then if you look at the sentence, if I'm to ask you what is the noun there, I'm sure you'd say John and boy, isn't it? Yes. And so if I want to read this sentence, I'll say John is a boy. Can we say that together? Yeah, so that is how you read your sentence, stressing on your content words. Now, let us look at another example. Let's look at this sentence we have here. How would you read this? If I'm to read this, I'll say, Mary is my sister. Can we say that together? Beautiful. You're doing very well. Keep it up. Now let's look at another example of a noun.